Test. Close that door. Okay, well, I guess we're not closing that door. Hello, good morning, everyone. How's everyone feeling? A little bit of a headache for the in-person folks, yeah? Everyone wants to stay out a little late? Yeah? All right. And hello, remote attendees. I did not forget you either. My name is Erica Louie, and I am the head of data at DBT Labs. And thank you so much for joining this session. I'm super pumped. If you did not drink your coffee this morning, totally fine. Kate is bringing in so much energy this morning. So I hope you're all ready to join us, where the title of the session is All Aboard, Why Cross-Team Buy-In is the Key to Smooth Sailing. What a title, Kate. And I keep saying Kate, but let me formally introduce her. This is Kate Schiffelbein. Would you like to come on the stage? Kate is the Director of Business Intelligence at Kentik, the network observability company. And some fun facts about Kate. Kate is a veteran in this space. In fact, this is her third time building a data team at a startup.
That's right.
Wow, you still got that youthful energy.
Hasn't taken me out yet.
And then another fun fact that's even more fun than that one is Kate loves word games, board games, all games. In fact, Kate was also a contestant on Wheel of Fortune, and on top of that, she won. Yeah. All right, well, any question that you may have, comments, questions, concerns, join us at Coalesce All Aboard in DBT Slack. If you have not joined us yet in the DBT Slack community, y'all, it's day 3. What have you been doing? But it's not too late. You can go to community.getdbt.com and then search for Coalesce All Aboard on DBT Slack. So enough of me. Kate, let's get started.
Let's do it. I love it. Grab this baby. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. I know it has been a packed week, tons of sessions. Your brains are probably a little bit full by now, unless you emptied them last night partying. So hopefully everybody's caffeinated and ready to go this morning. But I do want to talk to you about why I really think that, as we say, cross-team buy-in, getting that collaboration is the biggest key to your own data team's success. I am, as Erica said, the Director of Business Intelligence at Kentik. This is my third time building and launching a data team or a data product. I have been in industries ranging from inventory management to college sports and now to network observability. And yet, despite the very different industries that I have been in, I've found that there are some consistent problems that pop up when it comes to your internal teams. So my hope is that by sharing some of those war stories and battle wounds that I've gotten in the past, that it'll help you pave the way and make it a little bit smoother for your own teams. So first of all, what does sailing have to do with BI anyways? Well, have you ever taken a cruise? You pack your bag, you board a ginormous ship, and you make your way through a really confusing series of elevators and hallways until you get into your shoebox-sized room. And you watch through a window as the harbor you know disappears over the horizon. The next morning, you wake up, you grab your backpack, you head off your ship, and you find yourself standing at the entrance to a town you're unfamiliar with. And if you didn't prepare, you might look around and realize you don't speak the language. You don't know much about where you are. Is it safe to travel? Are they receptive to tourists? Are there customs you should be aware of in order to be respectful? Well, building and launching a data team or a new project within your data team can be a lot like that cruise ship adventure. If you fail to prepare, you may find yourself in unfamiliar territory, unsure how to proceed. If you want your initiatives to be successful, dare I say even enjoyable, you got to make sure you're going. And not only that, you have to make sure that the teams you're working with are happy that you came to visit. If you don't prepare, instead of smooth sailing on the open seas, you might find yourself up a creek without a paddle, If you caught the Rose Apothecary shirt and you're a Schitt's Creek fan, you'll catch a lot of these references. So what does it look like if you're in that tough, up a creek without a paddle situation for your data team? Well, tell me if any of this sounds familiar. You roll out content and get no adoption. Your business teams can't agree on priorities or a definition of done. You find yourself dealing with unclear project scope and scope creep. Does that all sound familiar? Now, it's really easy to place blame on all of your business teams when you encounter these problems. They aren't using the dashboard. They can't provide clear requirements, and they don't understand the value. But the truth is, if you take control of the ship, you will surprise yourself with how much easier you can make the journey. So how do you control your destiny, so to speak? Well, if we think back to our travel analogy, our cruise analogy, the first thing we realized in this unfamiliar town was that we didn't speak the language. Next, we needed to understand the social climate. We needed to know if the area was safe or if there were any customs that we needed to respect. So let's run through this and talk about how this applies to your data team. When it comes to learning the language as it applies to travel, it's pretty straightforward, right? If I take a cruise down the coast of Mexico, it would be helpful if I know Spanish. If I go to Paris, French would come in handy. That's all pretty common sense, but there's a little bit more nuance when it comes to applying this to your data team. Now, the first most obvious aspect of learning the language is, of course, the terminology. You need to actually understand what it is that your business teams are saying when they tell you what they need. If you have to work with customer success, but you don't know what ARR, churn, and net retention mean, you're going to struggle to follow the conversation. But there's an additional aspect to learning the language, which is understanding the team's data maturity. Thinking about this from the language perspective, you would use a different vocabulary when talking to college professors than you would to your 6-year-old nephew. If you understand the team or the individual's data maturity, you'll craft your message and your content in a way that makes the most impact. When you're learning the business team's language, obviously, first and foremost, you have to understand the actual terms that they use. Like we said, for your customer success team, ARR, churn, net retention, things like that are really important. But as you ask these questions, like the ones that you see up here, they really serve more than just that purpose. You're also driving your business teams to question what they know. They have to think about, well, I rely on these KPIs or these terms. Are they really what's important? Is my process that I use to generate these values actually the most optimized? Is it effective? So as you take them through this process, you're helping them do the work of curating the project scope to focus on what's really important. Now, one of the questions that I list up here has a tendency to get some sometimes spicy responses and discussion going, which is your team 100% responsible for this goal? And I'll give you an example. I was working with our SDR team a while back. Company leadership wanted that team to pay attention to how many of their SDR leads ultimately became close-won deals. Seems to make sense to me. So we included it in the project scope. Well, as soon as we sat down for planning with the SDR team, they immediately pushed back. From their perspective, they didn't have control over how well the salespeople did their jobs or if they were going to close the deals. So if we put that KPI front and center on a dashboard, on the main dashboard that the SDRs are using, from their perspective, the data doesn't apply to them. It doesn't matter because we're not speaking their language. Think of a team in your organization that you've had to work with. If you presented really complex forecasting formulas or ML models, are they more Sheldon or more Winona? When you think about that, data maturity really reflects not just in how well a team is using data today, it's also their capacity to process and understand new data that's presented to them. A lot of people have a really hard time adopting new processes or incorporating a new tool if they don't understand, at least at a basic level, how it works or why it produces the results that it does. A little while back, I was working with one of our revenue teams, and I asked two of the leaders, on a given day, how do you decide which customers your team needs to call? And they laughed. The first one said, it depends on what side of the bed he wakes up on. The other one said, it depends on the strength of his coffee. Is that understandable? Yes. Relatable? Absolutely. I am on board. Is it data-driven? Not in the slightest. This is a team that was incredibly data immature. So we have to think about that. When we're working with them, they don't have the capacity to immediately go to step 10 when it comes to data. For contrast, a little while later, I was working with one of our technical evangelists, and she was looking to better identify high possibility of success prospects. When I asked her how she was doing that work today, she took me through a beautiful Excel workbook that had a variety of data sources and ultimately produced a weighted score for each prospect. She had an extremely high level of data maturity. So that information about each of those teams has to affect how we approach them. For the first team, if I go straight to ML and advanced formulas, they're not going to understand the how, and that project will likely flop. But on the flip side, with the second team, if I just build a dashboard that ranks prospects by 1 or 2 dimensions, we're way behind where they've already gotten to, and we haven't provided any additional value. So, if they don't offer coffee or spreadsheets, how do you determine a team's data maturity? Well, there's some questions I like to ask, like, how do you make your decisions? So far, how have you used data in the past? And have you identified any obvious areas where you think data can help you improve in the future? When you ask these questions, listen to the answers and tweak your approach based on what they say. When you collaborate with your business teams in that way to speak their language, to adapt to their current data maturity, you're really paving the way for your own success. Because fairly or not, your data team will be judged based on how well the business teams make use of the content that you provide, what you develop. So if you can speak their language and adapt, you'll really find yourself with what you need to succeed: clearer project scope, defined definition of done, and eager adoption of the content. Last year, I booked a trip with one of my best friends to Guadeloupe, which is a gorgeous island in the Eastern Caribbean. I was stoked, counting down the days, bags were packed, life was good, and about a week before we were supposed to depart, I get a text that says, have you seen the news? So I Google Guadeloupe, and what I find is story after story of violent riots and protests that had broken out that morning. Streets were barricaded, buildings and cars were on fire, it was chaos. Now, as much as I was stressed to upend my trip at the last minute, what I was grateful for was that I found out before getting on a plane. Anytime you're heading into a new area, it's good to know what the environment is like there. Are the people happy and prosperous? Do they look like they sing nice coordinated songs in the town square? Has there been changes in leadership leading to upheaval, or is it stable? And finally, are the people receptive or hostile to tourists? As strange as it seems, you have to do that same sort of research with the business teams that you're going to start working with. Are they stable, high-performing, and organized? Do they have well-documented processes, strong leadership, and good communication within the team? Or is that team, for lack of a better word, a dumpster fire? Have there been changes in leadership? Do the teams feel like they're understaffed and they don't have the resources that they need to succeed? Does no one really know what anyone else is doing? Understanding that climate will shape how you approach the team, because if the team is in turmoil, it's going to be significantly harder to get buy-in, to be prioritized. Now, you may be thinking, valid, not my circus, not my monkeys, right? We've got a project to do, this team needs to cooperate regardless of what other internal drama they've got going on. And in an ideal world, that's true. But in actuality, that social climate is going to directly affect your ability to succeed, because upheaval within the team is going to affect their priorities, including how much they prioritize spending time on your initiative and your project. Even if your project is prioritized, if the team's internal priorities are in flux, you're really going to have a hard time getting a clear project scope. Now, if you're slated to work with a team and during your prep you find out that the team is in turmoil, you might be able to delay the project, which is probably the ideal scenario. Give them time to get more organized. But in practice, as I'm sure many of you have dealt with, that's not always the case. You can't kick the project down the road just because the team is a little bit of a mess. So if that's the case, that's where flexibility is your friend. You may have a scope that you're looking to reach. You may have a defined project plan that you'd like to use to approach this. But if the team is a mess, if they are in turmoil, you're going to have to get flexible in order to get successful. When I do larger project inceptions, I have a very defined plan that I like to use. It involves some homework for the business team leaders before we start the project. It's some brainstorming sessions with the team to make sure we get everybody's ideas and understand all the stakeholders. But if a team is in turmoil, we have to flex on that plan. So what was homework becomes collaborative working sessions. What was a brainstorming session becomes almost more like a business consultation, where you use those questions that we talked about before to guide them down the path towards getting organized and using data to speed up that process. Throughout the process, you have to focus on what you can control. Because when you're trying to work with a team that's a mess, it's frustrating, and it really feels unfair to be judged based on how well you herd cats. But at the end of the day, if you prepare and you're flexible, you can find a solution that works for everybody. You can control the language. You can control the level of data maturity that you use in your approach. To some extent, you can control how much content you build and what data sources you make available. So if you do that, you use that flexibility to your advantage, and you adapt to the team you're working with, you're going to be on a much smoother path. Okay, if I could sing, I would sing this for you, but I will spare you. In business, there's always a lot of talk about respect, right? Being respectful, showing respect. But when it comes to working with your different business teams, there's a couple of nuances here that I want to talk through. When you look at being a respectful traveler, there are a number of things that come to mind, right? If you are in a new area, you don't want to litter, you don't want to leave graffiti, you want to be respectful of the local customs and make sure that you're acknowledging the history and the culture there. Another piece of it is don't let being a hero get in the way of making an impact. Sometimes it's easy to go into areas that are struggling and feel like you're the knight in shining armor who's arrived. Don't let that hero complex get in the way of actually making an impact. So just as being a respectful tourist affects what you can get out of a trip and how well you're received, you have to approach your business teams with respect if you want to get that collaboration and communication. You have to remember that you're being evaluated by their reception of your efforts and your project. So you want to start off on a strong foot. Now, I'm a big outdoors person. I might be a data nerd, but when I get burnt out, I get my recharge from being in absolutely the middle of nowhere. And when it comes to camping and outdoors, this is a very common phrase. You've probably heard it, and it's pretty obvious. Don't leave trash at your campsite. Don't carve your name into the trees or disturb rock formations. There's a group effort that comes into play to keep all of these areas beautiful, right? But how do you apply this to your data team? Well, let me run through a scenario with you. Say we're working with our solutions engineering team, right? Our SEs. We go through a project with them and we build a dashboard that's full of vanity metrics. They're KPIs and things that are good to know, but don't necessarily drive any of their workflow. It's not really helpful. Leadership wants the team to start using data, so they tell them, hey, you need to start every day by looking at this dashboard. So the SEs start every day by looking at the dashboard. But this dashboard, while pretty, isn't helpful. It's not driving them to do anything. It's not improving their process. Is the SE team in a better place than they were when we found them? I'd argue not. All we did was take 15 minutes of their day. We effectively littered their calendar by just adding to all of the other things they had to do. So if we rerun that scenario, we work with the SE team, we ask all of those questions that we looked at before, And we identified that in their process, they're spending up to an hour a day just figuring out who to talk to next. So during our process, we build a dashboard that helps them quickly see who needs the most attention. Now when the SEs start using that dashboard, we actually cut that time from an hour a day down to 15 minutes. We've cleaned up 45 minutes a day of their calendar. The SE team is more efficient and more effective. We have left them in a better place than they were when we found them. Something else is that hero complex that we mentioned. And I'm a big Super Mario nerd. We'll throw down on Super Nintendo with anybody. But when we look at this, data is a really powerful tool. It's a huge resource. It's growing constantly in value and size and provenance. And we've all heard that phrase, data is the new oil. In fact, I think somebody made a bingo card for Coalesce that has all sorts of fabulous phrases about how wonderful data is. And I'm not disagreeing. I mean, we're all here for a reason. But bringing data to a team that hasn't had it before can sometimes feel like you're rescuing Princess from that dark, dataless dungeon and bringing her into the light. Like Bowser is that old school manager who tells you he doesn't need anything more than his own intuition. And I get it. When somebody says that they make their decisions based on the strength of that morning's Americano, I kind of want to ask how you've made it to this point. But the truth is that these people have made it. These teams have made it. Sales have made deals, and they have found good prospects long before our beloved DBT or Databricks or Snowflake or your tool of choice ever existed. And we have to respect that history and that tribal knowledge that exists if we want to actually be able to build a functional collaboration with that team. We dedicate a lot of our lives to our jobs. So when somebody says, I don't see value in what you do or what you've produced, the first instinct is to get defensive, right? But if you can swallow your pride and approach the situation with a bit of humility, you're going to find yourself leaps and bounds ahead of where you would be otherwise. Now, a while back, my team planned an initiative with another one of our revenue teams. So we were getting ready for it. We got a meeting together with the team leadership to set the stage for the project. I introduced our team, set the goals, and then asked the manager for this team to just give us an intro. Tell me how you've used data so far. Where do you think you're using it well? And are there obvious places you've seen where you think you could improve your process? What I didn't know was that we had a Bowser in disguise, so to speak. This manager said, I don't know why we're in this meeting. I don't really see value in what you do. I don't think that data can replace good intuition, and I've been doing this job for enough years that I don't need a dashboard to tell me how to do it. Wow, okay. When you've been put back on your heels the way that I was in that moment, it's really easy to go straight to that defense. I want to just start telling him all of the reasons why I think he's wrong. But doing that isn't going to actually get me anywhere, right? Butting heads does not mean productivity. So what I have to do is pivot, stop using the word data, and simply start asking questions from a non-threatening standpoint. How does your team work? What's important to you? What does a day-to-day life look like for one of your team members? And as we work through those questions, my mind is always, where can data be applied? And when we get to somewhere where I think data can be applied, we guide the conversation in that direction. Once again, never using the word data because we've found that that's threatening. But they identified that they need to figure out which accounts to call next, similar to our other rev teams. So we ask, how do you make that decision? And then, leaving out data, is there anything, data, that would make that decision-making process easier? So as we work through this with them, we've taken away the fight. Because at the end of the day, data is going to improve their process, but it's not replacing it. Now, if you're a data person like me, you probably apply data to every aspect of your life. I have spreadsheets for everything from vacation planning, home projects, grocery shopping, whatever else it may be. And I know I'm not alone. A lot of you here probably live in that same mindset. So if you can take yourself and open your mind to the roles that you have to work with, put yourself in their place. If you picture yourself walking a day in their shoes, going through their process, your natural instinct as a data person is going to see all of the places where data can be applied. And when you do that, you're walking side by side with them. You're no longer a foreigner who's telling them how to do their jobs. You're a friend. You're an ally who has simply brought more tools to the table. And that perspective shift is how you get their buy-in. And now you found the path where everyone wins. Okay, so our goal for today was to understand why getting that buy-in from your organization and the other business teams is so important to your own success. Let's look at what success looks like for a business team, or for a data team. Your business teams, your stakeholders, your clients maybe are using data. They're making good data-driven decisions. In an ideal world, your source data is even getting cleaner and more organized because people understand the impact that data has. You've got buy-in and support from across the organization. And what does that mean for your team? Well, picture a discussion among leadership where we're talking about next year's budget. You want 2 more headcount for the data team. If the customer success team lead chimes in and says, hey, look, the work that the data team did saved us a ton of time, made us way more efficient, and helped us hit our retention goals, their return, their ROI, lends weight to the value that you're saying your team can provide. So all these tools we've talked about for fostering collaboration with your business teams are really just building blocks for your own success. As you learn to better communicate and evaluate a team's maturity, you get clearer project scope. As you understand how to approach the team and where you need to adapt, you clear the blockers and you're in the right mindset to make progress. And as you respect the people and places that make up the business teams, you become a valued ally. The last piece that I'd like to share with you is that I would encourage you to find your Liz. Finding your Liz means identifying the stakeholder who has the most potential to help you gain buy-in from across the board. And I'll tell you this, it's usually not someone on the data team. It may not even be someone who's technical. My previous employer, nicknamed PAC, was in the college athletics industry. Liz was a lead client partner. And let me tell you, Liz was tough as nails. And for that reason, Liz took on the most challenging clients. Now, when I started, I knew very little about college athletics. I was a science and theater kid, not exactly Miss Athletic. And yet somehow I knew even less about how colleges and universities ran fundraising. But what I did know when I came in was that I would be fighting an uphill battle. I was joining a few other data engineers, and we had been challenged with creating an in-application analytics module for the clients. This was something that had been really requested, was long overdue, and to make matters worse, they had tried twice to do it, going so far as to tell clients it was coming, and then the project failed. So you can imagine that Liz was really sick of getting an earful from clients, wondering when this feature was coming out. And as a result of this, we didn't really have the faith of the organization that third time was going to somehow be the charm. But so the data team and I burrowed into our corner of the office and we got to work. Pipelines were built and torn apart and built again and torn apart and built again. Our data warehouse was set up, structured, designed, and loaded. But as we were doing this, I knew I needed to really understand the clients who we were building for. And what I saw in meetings and working sessions was that other client partners looked to Liz. So as much as I wanted to get defensive when she didn't believe in our project, I knew that she was going to be key. So I went to her to learn about our clients, to learn their language, to understand their level of data maturity, to understand their processes and what was important to them. And Liz was receptive to teaching, even if all along the way she would say, I still don't believe this is actually going to happen. And my ego wanted to shut her up. When I was ready for beta, I wanted to say, none of your clients get this. Because my ego said you shouldn't have doubted me all along. But once again, I knew that she was key. And so we went to Liz when we were ready for beta. Liz went, looked at the product, and realized it was what they needed. So she got our beta group together, and more importantly, she let the entire company know that third time was the charm. By the end of the day, our Slack had blown up, people were excited, and we had the faith of the company. And later that year, when the CTO asked to double the data team's headcount, no one pushed back. That partnership with Liz, understanding her process, her needs, and her clients, led us to turning our biggest skeptic into our biggest supporter. And that is ultimately what became success and growth for the data team. Thank you all for being here with me.